Greetings from Pandora. Welcome to a Vault Hunter's Guide to the Borderlands, the best Borderlands podcast on the Echo Net. I'm Drew.
I'm Jeff.
Thanks for joining us today for episode number 32, where today we're going to be discussing power creep in Borderlands. But first, just a quick reminder that you can always get in contact with us via Twitter at Vault Hunters Pod or through our email, vaulthuntersguide@gmail.com.
And don't forget, you can watch us record the podcast live at twitch.tv/A Vault Hunter's Guide. And also, we are back on YouTube. Just search A Vault Hunter's Guide. So, yeah. Drew.
Jeff.
How's your last 2 weeks in the Borderlands been?
Before we get into that,
Uh-oh.
I had a thought today while I was mowing the lawn.
Uh-huh.
And I need to address it with you.
You thought?
The existence of Eden 6 implies the existence of Edens 1 through 5, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Eden 1 just like the original Garden of Eden from the Bible?
No, probably not. More than likely, Eden 1 is something where shortly after humans left Earth, shortly after humans left Earth or wherever they come from in Borderlands, I'm assuming it's Earth, that they founded a planet and they wanted to call it something similar to a paradise. And so they probably called it Eden. And then and then there was a separatist group from that group, and they went on and they're like, well, we're going to make our own Eden with blackjack and hookers, So they called it Eden 2, and then so on and so forth, until eventually you get it so far removed that you got a bunch of backwater hillbillies that are like, well, we're going to make our own Eden, and it's going to be the best. Eden 6.
And thus Jacobs was born.
Yes.
Okay.
Although maybe not, according to the last DLC.
Yeah, that's true. Similarly, Pandora implies the existence of Pan
Boxes.
Boots and Pan Sniper
and Pan Backpack and Pan Map.
Pan Benny the Bull.
See, even that's like too far of like a thing for me. Like,
right?
I never, I don't have kids, and let alone young kids. So I don't even know. So that's true.
You ain't even know.
So
all right, past 2 weeks in the Borderlands, fine, good.
Yeah,
been trying out all kinds of different builds and stuff on different characters and such. Amara builds and Moe's builds, Zane builds.
Mm-hmm.
Flak's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Flak is pretty much just 3-shot Flak from the Thick Fillet video from a while ago.
Yeah.
It's super good. Moe's is pretty much still, after trying several builds, I still like K6's Mozerker build the best.
Absolutely.
The Sapper class mod on her is super, super good.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes it really easy to stay alive. Just keep shooting shit. Yeah.
I'm currently and I know that I talked to you about this, but for the sake of the podcast, I am currently in the middle of working with a build for Zane that I'm getting somewhere with, though it's not performing like I'd like it to yet. And for people wondering, the main idea here is that we haven't really seen too much, or at least I haven't. If you have, please feel free to send it to our Twitter or whatever. Haven't seen much in the way of someone using Zane's distributed denial, which is his capstone in the undercover tree, too much. And for people that are unaware, his barrier gains the effects of his currently equipped shield mod. Additionally, shield effects are applied to all allies near the barrier. Bonuses to Zane are reduced. So I think maybe part of the problem is I'm trying to focus too much on the aspect that he himself, or the barrier itself, gains the effects of the shield mod. And maybe this would be something that works better if it were applied, if we were focusing specifically on the part where it's applied to allies and everything. Maybe applying those same effects to allies when they're near barrier would be better. So I don't know. Maybe that's the part And maybe that effect isn't meant to be a solo style build, and maybe it's meant to be more of a group thing, and then it might work better.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I feel like it could be it's one of those things where it's like, if it worked like we thought that it should, then it could be really cool, but it doesn't for some reason.
Yeah. The main kind of things that we've been trying here the main kind of things that I've been trying here are things like using the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, which for fans of Borderlands 2, that was not something that you even wanted in that game, because it would just kill you more often than it would do anything for you. So,
right.
But what it does is about 25% of the time, it'll just throw out IEDs that explode and damage enemies. So that means that your barrier, anytime, about 25% of the time it gets hit, does the same thing. But the power just isn't there, even with buffing splash damage and area of effect damage and things like that. At least I haven't been able to make it work. So I don't get quite as heavy into the math as some people do. People like Shadow Evil and Thick Fillet and Garwood and people like that, though. So.
Yeah. What you got to do is play in a party with a Mose and just leave Mose inside the barrier, and Zane runs off and does his own thing.
That's actually not a bad idea.
You're welcome.
So, like I said, we're probably going to try some other stuff and just mess around with it. But if you've seen anyone really use that distributed denial in a super fun way, let us know. At least as far as intended. I'm sure that there's someone out there that's been like, oh, well, we're not using it for anything that's intended for, but it has this weird thing that you do, and it does stuff and blows everyone up.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah, that's what I've been working on. Anyway, so yeah, like we said, today we are going to be discussing power creep in Borderlands, mainly 3, primarily throughout 3, but in all the games in general. So, and for those of you asking what power creep is, I'm going to let Drew explain it.
What is power creep? Okay, I can't even pretend like I'm going to.
What is a man?
Power creep is essentially something that happens when you have multiple releases or multiple I don't know how else to describe that part.
Versions?
It's just yeah, there you go. Or expansions or whatever, and things just keep getting better as you go, but also more, just straight up more powerful. Magic players are really, really used to this at this point.
Yeah, Pokemon TCG players also.
Yep.
Destiny players, I'm sure, are very familiar with it as well. So,
sorry, which ones?
Destiny players.
Oh yeah, Destiny players. But in the examples of Borderlands 3, some of the examples that we have here are the Monarch is clearly better than the Dictator.
Even though they do essentially the same thing.
Yeah, nearly identical things. Some of the other ones, Sandhawk is infinitely better than a Lyuda.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, there are the downsides of ammo count with a Sandhawk, but still, I would take a Sandhawk over a Lyuda any day of the week. They're functionally
the same as far as what you're trying to achieve with them. So if you can get one or the other, you want to get the Sandhawk.
Right, exactly. Same with the light show over the Maggie. And now I know a lot of people would be like, now hold on, those are completely separate weapons. Because that's exactly what I said to Jeff when he proposed that comparison. And I'm like, now hold on a second. But he was like, think about it. Honestly, it's a multi-pellet pistol, and you're just trying to get pellet count, and it does massive damage. At this point, given the choice, would you take a light show or a Maggie? And I would take a light show.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, give us some other examples that are just in Borderlands 3.
So just in Borderlands 3, some of the other ones that we've talked about are the Reflux is just a better version of a Brainstormer. One of the arguments you can make on that is that, well, they do different elements, and that's true. And if you're all in on one or the other, then you're going to pick that. But if you're going for straight up damage, the reflux is going to be better than what the brainstormer is. The monocle was outclassed by the unseen threat in the same way, in that it's one shot or one pellet, high damage. Jacob's sniper rifle. It's the same thing. Granted, the unseen threat also has the extra add ability on it where it makes the homing things come in and damage enemies. But even beyond that, the sheer damage of just the single pellet is much better on the unseen threat.
Yes.
In that same vein, it's the same situation with the Seventh Sense is a better version of the King and Queen's Call. Going back a minute though, one thing that we actually brought up was I was talking to Beth about this episode, and she said that she agreed as far as the reflux and the brainstormer goes, which was kind of sad to see that happen because she's a big fan of the brainstormer. She really likes that gun. But one of the things I thought was funny about it was she herself even said, she's like, yeah, they didn't even really need to be two different legendaries. You could have just had them be one legendary that had the option, that had multiple different elements on it.
Yeah.
And that would have worked just fine. Sure, you probably would have had to put in some different graphics for what they looked like, because lightning doesn't look like acid, obviously.
Right.
But the idea is still there. And I would have honestly been fine even if it was just a different color. Green would have been corrosive and blue would have been shock and red would have been fire. Even that would have been okay with me.
A fire brainstormer now. It's like, yeah. I'm like, ooh.
Don't worry, that's probably coming out in the next DLC and they're going to call it something else.
Oh, you can't call it the Firestorm.
No. So the brainstormer and the reflux and the
heartburn.
The heartburn? I like that. That's solid.
You're welcome, anyway. Gearbox. It's all yours.
Anyway, so, and then something that we're going to be probably bringing up and talking about a lot. Drew, do you want to give us what that last example is?
Yeah, so the last one is the flipper, and it's better than every single SMG in the game. Like, unless you're doing niche stuff with, like, I'm a TDR chucking Mose. A TDR chucking Mose. I'm a TDR
Mose. What's that? I'm a Mose that chucks TDRs. Yeah. TDR.
If you throw TDR SMGs, then sure. But, like, other than that, the flipper is better than every single SMG in the game.
Currently.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and before that, it was different. A lot of people were using redistributors. A lot of people were using Night Hawkins. A lot of people were using cloud kills, just different things depending on what you need it for. But now it's kind of like, yeah, just get a flipper with the anointment and with the elemental damage that you want, and that's all you need.
Yep, that's it.
So we're going to talk about that, and obviously the reason that we bring these ones up is because all of these things were either dropped as post Mayhem 2.0 weapons in the game, or they were brought in from DLCs in the game. And one of the really interesting things is that none of these are actually from the first DLC, though.
Yeah, none of them.
So it seemed like they did a pretty good job of balancing it, and then they went crazy from there. So
I think that you still, out of the first DLC, out of the Handsome Jackpot one, you still got some really good class mods in the Stackbot, and obviously Zane's Seeing Dead class mod is just ruling every single Zane build.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, other than that, like we were on that shit for a little bit. Like I remember farming for Lucky Sevens because Maggies were much less reliable as far as being able to get them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because
Maggies.
I didn't really. What's that?
Oh, I was just saying. Yeah, Maggies, and I remember the same thing with the ion cannon too.
Yeah, ion cannon was like super super easy to get. And granted, they did nerf the ion cannon a bit, but like it was still really really solid. But it's just not as popular anymore. And And I understand that as you play, you're looking for newer and shinier toys to play with, right?
Right.
As the game goes.
Right.
But it doesn't always have to be a more powerful version of something.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct. And that kind of brings us to one of our big talking points about this, which is, are there too many legendaries in the first place? Was one of the things that we brought up. Are there too many legendaries that we just don't use, or that are functionally the same as other ones but better or worse, or whatever the situation is? And we did a couple of things here. So first of all, I'm going to get this out of the way because this is something that we don't have in the notes, but this is something that Drew and I did that we think is really telling. So we're not going to say what they are specifically, but we went through and we did just a quick little kind of litmus test, I guess you call it, of and it was just, I read him a list of legendaries in one class. In this case, it was pistols. I just read the entire list of pistols that were in Borderlands 3, and it wasn't even all of them because the list that we found was actually pretty incomplete.
Yeah, it was actually just a list of the legendaries in the vanilla, version of Borderlands. So like no Malawan takedown pistols or anything, no DLC pistols, no special event guns, nothing like that.
Right.
Just vanilla original Borderlands 3 legendary pistols.
Right. So what I did was I read him this list and I read just the name. And I asked him, do you want to keep it in the game or do you want to get rid of it from the game? Or I guess another term would be, would you be upset if it wasn't in the game anymore? And essentially what we did was, without going through the hard numbers, it was about one, actually taking this all into effect and everything, about 1/4 of all of the weapons or all of the pistols in here, he decided that he wanted to keep, and the rest of them he just didn't care about.
Yep.
And that's a pretty big problem, considering that means that to him, they weren't noteworthy enough in any way, whether it be a fun way to use it, or high damaging, or even as far as being something that was like a callback to a previous thing that you thought was fun, that was good enough for him to want to keep it.
Yeah, no, there was some that were just not. There's some guns that I just don't use ever on any character, no matter what build I'm using.
Right.
And so they're not necessary to keep.
Yeah.
Poor Torg. I don't think that I kept a single Torg pistol.
Yeah, which is super weird. So, it's
weird.
And it's pretty sad too, considering the fact that we actually have someone that's built around splash damage, or that someone that can be built around splash damage. Moes can be built around splash damage pretty well. And the fact that you didn't want to keep any of the Torg weapons is still kind of like, oh man, that's a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's unfortunate. But I mean, like, I don't care if you get rid of the Breeder, the Echo, the Royston's Thorns, none of them. Get rid of them all. I don't care.
So that being said, one of the other big things is, are there too many repeat legendaries? Like, are there too many legendaries that are coming back from game to game to game that they feel like they need to keep in there, do you think?
I think that's part of the issue, but I also think that I wouldn't mind so much if the guns were still as good as they used to be. Like a Lyuda you want no matter what. You used to want to allow you to pretty much no matter what.
Yeah.
And it was the same at the beginning of Borderlands 3, but now it's dropped off a ton because of power creep. And granted, like, that happened in previous versions of Borderlands 2. Like, you could have wanted a Lyuda to begin with, and then when the Captain Scarlet DLC came out, you just chucked that Lyuda for a Pimpernel.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, you can still absolutely use the Lyuda for a long time in Borderlands 2.
Yeah.
And similarly, the Sandhawk came back, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
That's a weird one.
Yeah, that's really weird.
The Unkempt Herald is one that I'm glad came back, but, like, is nerfed a bit.
Yeah, that's true. Because so much of Borderlands 2 ended up being balanced around it at endgame.
Yeah, which is just not cool. Just
Yeah.
not the way that it should be.
Right.
What else we got? Like the Hellfire. The Hellfire was super awesome in Borderlands 1, pretty good in Borderlands 2, and then in Borderlands 3 it's just not really noteworthy.
Right. Yeah,
Um
it's okay.
yeah, and that's unfortunate. It's if it's not going to have the same impact that it did previously, with the exception of the Unkempt Herald, because that thing was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, then I really don't care if it's in the new game. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, I
It's
agree with
it's
that.
more disappointing than anything.
Yeah. It's I know this is super cliche, but it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that phrase "can't go home again" kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go.
So, no, you can't be a shooty man's again. I don't know. Like, I'm sorry that I always get those things when you're drinking. Like,
That's all right.
but yeah, it's just there's so many, and the weird part is not only are there a lot of legendaries, there's not even really that many. There's not even really that many uniques, I guess, that aren't legendaries. It's like if you're getting a build, it's pretty much all going to be legendaries for the most part, which is
For the
fine.
most part, yeah.
But I remember playing Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 1, and a lot of the guns that you would use in there were uniques that weren't legendaries, just because what they did worked really well for you. And I feel like that's a good segue into our next part.
Such as the Pimpernel, or Sandhawk, or Ruby, or, you know.
Yeah, correct. So, and I feel like that leads pretty well into our next situation, which is, are there too many similar legendaries? And what we mean by that is that it seems like there's too many legendaries that do the same exact thing. And so you're just going to pick the one that does it better, as opposed to having enough legendaries that do unique things. And we understand it's like, well, these two don't do the exact same thing. It's like, no, but they do it closely enough to where they're used in the same manner.
Right.
And I guess that's the problem. So,
i.e., Lyuda Sandhawk.
Correct.
They go about it different ways, but they do the same thing.
Yep.
Maggie and Light show like at first glance, very different weapons, but on take a second look at it, and it's pretty similar in what you're looking to get out of it.
Right. Yep. I would agree with that. So, I feel like there are too many similar legendaries, and I want to have stuff that really does things. I want to have new things that come out in the next couple of DLCs or whatever it is that do things very differently. I understand that as a developer, it's probably pretty tough to keep coming up with new ideas, and especially when you're even limited to some of the architecture that you are, because at this point, I mean, relatively speaking, the architecture that you're using with the PS4 and the Xbox One, you're doing this pretty late in the life cycle, because so you already know how to use it to its max, but you also know what your limits are. I'm wondering if maybe they could get away with a little bit more if they were able to use, if they were able to use the next generation consoles and things like that.
Possibly, it's possible that that's the case. I just think that it's really hard to come up with new things that work really well. Like one of the most unique legendaries in Borderlands 3 is the boring gun.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody uses it.
Yeah.
It's super, super unique. No other gun does it. Nobody uses it because it's not worth it. It doesn't work as it should,
Right. Yeah.
I haven't used the boring gun since, buffs and everything, so maybe like it does mad damage now or something, but
so I'm going to throw something out here, and I know we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to throw something out, and I guess this does kind of segue into our next bit a little bit. And feel free to take this however you want. Do you think that part of the problem is that they are still using the same model for Borderlands 3 and for these games that they have for nearly the past decade.
So you're saying like vanilla game and then release a DLC every few months afterwards?
No, not even that. What I'm saying is one character, 3 skill trees, 1 capstone at the end of it. That kind of thing. And so every time you try and do that, because they've done that with 4 games now.
Mm-hmm.
Is it hard to continue on with that and to make things that are different enough and meaningful and impactful enough while also having different enough weapons and everything in the games?
Probably. I mean, you and I can attest to how difficult it is to come up with a character,
An original
and a skill tree.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult, and frankly, so are coming up with guns. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm not I'm not creative enough to pull that off. I just there needs to be a balance between uniqueness and power.
Yeah.
Like with the boring gun, it's super super unique, but like it's not worth it because it doesn't do the damage. Well, then buff the shit out of the damage so that way you can play with it and you can say, "Look, it's really hard to control, but when I land a shot, it's fucking awesome."
Right.
You know?
And there would be ways to use it too. It's like, look, yeah, I know it's hard to use. However, if you use it on Moes and then you increase the splash damage radius with Moes, then that actually applies to this. And it works better that way because of that reason.
Sure.
Because at this point, you're totally right. I mean, pretty much every character that I have is using the same weapons. On every character I'm at least using a Monarch and a Light Show and a Flipper.
Sure.
Like on every single one of them. And I would think that you're probably pretty close to the same, right?
It depends on the character, but yeah, for the most part.
For the most part, yeah. I'm not saying every character all the time, always, but for the most part, if you were to just start a new character or anything like that, or if you were just getting into mayhem levels, or even if you wanted some basic weapons that you knew could carry you regardless of build, you probably still get at least those 3.
I don't think that I would, because here's the thing. So what I would do is, say you jump in at level 13, right? You get the jump start there.
Yeah.
I would first go into, I would probably first just go and complete the story up to the point to where I could farm Gigamine for a little bit.
Sure.
Because that's just what I do. And then after that, then kind of towards the middle-ish of the playthrough, go and do the Wainwright and Hammerlock DLC to get some guns from there.
Yeah.
And then finish the main storyline. And then just go and grind and everything until I can get to max level. And then go into Bounty of Blood DLC.
Fair enough.
Because why wouldn't you? You know, it just doesn't... Everything in that DLC is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
But before that, we were all over the Wainwright and Hammerlock DLC. Because everything in it was so good.
Yep.
Cocky Bastard, Unseen Threat, Skull Masher.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Lil Edie, Anarchy.
Yep.
Yep. All that kind of good stuff. Oh, and and you have to go through it to get the pearl.
Yep.
So yeah, I get that.
Holy fuck, I forgot about the Anarchy. Holy shit, everybody was rocking that for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, until power creep happened when the next DLC came out.
Right. And like and again, we're not saying that we don't get it, because we do. It's like, without Borderlands is not exactly known for its stories, typically.
Mm-hmm.
So if not that, then what else is there to incentivize somebody to get to purchase the DLC or to purchase the season pass? You know?
Yeah. You know, it's like any game that's out there. I mean, rarely are there games where you buy them for the story. Even one of the ones that was like The Last of Us is generally considered to have like the best story in video games ever, and that's pretty debatable at this point, just because of the focus that developers have given to the stories. And even that was like almost a situation where it was like, man, that was a great story, but it kind of seemed like a one-off kind of a thing, because now the story in Last of Us 2 is not that great. You know, it's weirdly cobbled together, and you don't really get a sense of the depth of the characters and the relationships between them. So like they struck gold once, but they couldn't keep producing it almost, I guess.
Sure.
And this isn't hate on The Last of Us 2. It's got a lot of core mechanics and things that still make it a really enjoyable game. So no hate there. But the story didn't live up to what the first one did. But the idea behind stories in games is to not necessarily enjoy the story. It's to incentivize you to enjoy the mechanics behind the stories.
Right.
Like everyone plays Mario because it's like no one's sitting there, they're like, oh man, what's going to happen to this Mario story? Like, it's very rare that happens. You know, at the end of the day, even if you take it into a broader sense with like the RPG based Mario games and everything, it's like, look, at the end of the day, you know that Mario is going to save the day. That's the whole point of it, is that Mario is the hero and he's going to save the day. But everyone plays Mario because if they play the platformer ones, they enjoy running and jumping, you know, and stomping on Goombas. Or if you play, as an example, like Origami King just came out, which is, you know, the new Paper Mario game, then you enjoy the RPG elements and you enjoy, you know, still stomping on Goombas in a different way and hitting them with a hammer and the adventure aspect of it and exploring and everything like that. But no one's sitting there going, oh man, best story in video games, fucking Mario, man. You know, like.
Yeah, for sure. Even one of my favorite games of all time is the new God of War game from like 2018?
I think so, yeah.
One of my favorite games ever. And the story in it is phenomenal. The mechanics in it are phenomenal. And I would, if there was a DLC that had come out for that, I would absolutely play it. I wouldn't even question it.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't need to find out anything about it. I would play it. And that would just be for the story, okay? Now, if they said, hey, guess what? In this one, not only do we have new story content and stuff, but Kratos has a spear now that you can use. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm instantly be like, oh, shit, I wonder if there's a skill where you can, like, stomp and it like, you know, groups enemies in a line, and then you can huck the spear and pin like 5 of them to a tree or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That would be so awesome. The thing about it, though, is that with God of War specifically, okay, you have an axe, a shield, and you have the chain blades. Okay?
That don't even come in until like halfway into the game.
Yes. Spoiler. I guess
Maya's dead.
Yeah. So those are the things that you have available to you, and so they have to work within those parameters. So giving him a brand new weapon is literally game changing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you start with a base of a game in 2009, where they advertise millions of guns.
Mm-hmm. And then the sequel comes out claiming 87 bazillion guns.
Right. It's really, really fucking hard to keep coming up with cool shit and have it work all the time.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that's part of the problem is you almost need it to be a situation where they need to take a little bit less or they need to take a little bit away from each gun to spread that love around a little bit more.
Okay.
And I feel like that's one of the big things is that the reason that people use the light show is because it is multi-pellet, it is high fire rate,
Yep.
it is high magazine,
Yeah.
high damage,
Yeah.
and comes in any element or no element.
Right.
Okay. If you just focus the hell out of one of those elements and then spread everything else around, I mean, that's the whole point of why we don't use the Hellfire anymore, is because the whole point was it does a stupid amount of fire damage. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is zero wrong with that. But the problem is we now have things where it's like, all right, well, I'm going to use the flipper and I'm going to get it with fire damage on it. And I'm going to get it with I'm going to get it with an extra 200% fire anointment on it. And it also has a high pellet count and a fast fire rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
there's no downsides to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no downsides to the, and I know we keep on referencing them, but it's true. There's no downside to the flipper or to the light show. And the only thing that you could say for the Monarch is like, oh, well, if you want to use it in bipod mode, then you move slow and you jump. It's like, yeah, you're still pumping out so much damage that most people still do that though. So it's fine.
Right. and you do chew through ammo really fast with the Monarch as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then you just swap to a flipper or a light show for a little while. And, eventually through killing enemies, you'll pick up more assault rifle ammo and you'll be fine.
Right. Exactly.
Or you just use a cut-purse launch pad and you just never worry about ammo ever.
Correct. So
it's really I want to see more diverse guns. I was just sitting here, like, while you're talking, and I was trying to come up with a new gun, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my mouse that's sitting right here next to the computer, and I'm like, it's a gun that shoots a mouse, and I'm like, no, that's not gonna work. But then I was like looking at the cable attached to it, and I'm like, what if you had a gun that shot like a grappling hook,
Mm-hmm.
and then like it does elemental damage once it latches onto him. Like that would be sick on Amara, you know?
Almost like, so it'd be like, so let me run this by you. So let's say that you pull the trigger once and it shoots out, it's like a taser essentially. So you pull the trigger once and it hits the enemy, and the longer you hold that down, the more damage it does over time. But if you pull the trigger again, then it shoots out another one and the process starts all over.
Yeah, exactly. Or a gun that you shoot that shoots out like a wide, flat thing that knocks enemies over. Like it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's like guaranteed knockback,
Yeah.
So like if you just need a little breathing room for a second, just gives you a little space. So
you said something earlier as an accident, and it's leading me to a thought even that I think is hilarious. So you said something earlier about chucking Tediors, but you called it a Cheetior.
Cheetior, yeah.
So let's say there's a one-off gun in the game that's made by a company. So the idea in the game, obviously, is that Tedior is already a knockoff of like everybody else. It's like, it's like the big box store version of, the other gun companies. It's made to just be like cheap. And that's what it is. They're so cheap that you throw them away and just grab another one for ammo.
Yes.
So what if you have a knockoff of that called Cheetior? And the idea is that it explodes before you even throw it. Like you pull the trigger and it just explodes in your hand. All right. But here's the idea. So it can be any element. So let's say that you go through a Guardian takedown and you have extra splash damage on like Moze or someone like that, or even using an electric elemental Amara, and you have a transformer on and it's an electric element. So you just get into a group of enemies, maybe using a Quasar or something, which is also good when it's shock. And so you just bring, or a black hole or whatever. So you do that and you pull the trigger and it explodes and you get all your shield back and you do all this electric damage to all these enemies.
Yeah, dude, that would be sick. And as long as you make it sufficiently powerful, like not everybody's going to use that, but some people will use it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we know, we've heard the leaks out there that there's, that people have supposedly found the next skill trees, the next action skills, and everything like that. And I think that will help because the more skills that we have, the more chances other guns will have to shine, and that's a good thing. I feel that it is an improvement upon, as we said earlier, the idea of having the same model for, a decade. But that being said, I still think it'd be better just to have DLC characters that have 3 brand new skill trees apiece.
Yeah, I agree. And if you don't know what we're talking about as far as the skills and stuff, we'll go ahead and put in the description here a video by Epic NNG. He has a whole video on the leaks about possible new action skill trees and stuff. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because they're leaks and they're unconfirmed. So
Correct. So,
continuing with the power creep discussion, though, this is not the first time that it's happened. We kind of have in the show notes here. Did it happen in other games? Yes, unequivocally, it absolutely did. I mean, to a lesser extent in. I guess you can't even say that it's been happening since Borderlands 1.
Yeah. Yeah, you think of the DLCs in Borderlands 1, and you think of some of the weapons that you get from there, or even some of the gear that you get. Like, granted, is it kind of hard to get? Yeah, it is, but the weapons in or like the sniper comm for Lilith in Borderlands 1, that's stupid broken because she does so much damage as a sniper character in that. Or even like Mordecai's melee thing that he can get as well. It's the same kind of thing from that same DLC. Even with the remake of the game, you look at the new weapons they add to that, like the Silent Knight or the Violence, things like that. Those were stupid overpowered. Granted, it took 10 years to get there, but with those specifically, but sure. And that's the way it is. There's just been power creep in the games all the time.
Yeah, and there was not to mention there was also new weapons and stuff and new pearlescence and just all this other shit that you just couldn't get, in the base game. And so so it's been happening since Borderlands 1. Borderlands 2 really did something similar to what we see currently in Borderlands 3. So like, wasn't the Captain Scarlet DLC the first DLC that came out for Borderlands 2?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, to have all the weapons in there. So first of all, it did add Seraph weapons in there as well, and I think that did also add pearlescent weapons. So, and then like you said, you have the Pimpernel, and you have that was a lot. Maybe some people don't know this, but that was where the idea of the auto idol artifact first came into play. That was a unique in that DLC. There was an auto idol, Captain Blade's auto idol, and then you also have things like the 10-pounder, things like that in the game. So yeah, just all over the place.
Yeah. I to be fair, I couldn't really name any legendaries from the what's his name?
Hammerlock?
From the Hammerlock DLC. Can't really name a whole lot. Torg DLC, I don't think that there was anything unique, but there's just like a stupid good chance to get like a Deepa and everything else,
Well, I mean, there's the Deepa, and then that's how you also get Miss Moxie's kitty, which is really good on Krieg. Like, that's a game changer in there. That also, if you get it, I mean...
but you did specify just now on Krieg. That's the difference.
That's actually a really good point, yeah. So, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at is, did it happen in other games? Sure. Has it happened to the scale that it happened in Borderlands 3 so far? It's like, the answer is no. Because
I don't think so. I mean, in the Tiny Tina DLC, you had really, really great class mods.
Yeah.
But nothing so ubiquitous like that it's a necessary thing to play the game at the highest level, you know?
Right.
Like you can get legendary class mods in vanilla Borderlands, and those are going to be better than some of the ones that, well, I mean, depending on what you're doing, are going to be more useful to you than some of the, you know, chaotic monk or whatever that you can get in the Tiny Tina DLC. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're playing Zane, you're getting a Seeing Dead com.
Yeah, because yes, we know there are builds without it. We're very aware of that. Okay, no one's saying that there's not builds out there that don't use Seeing Dead. However, that being said, chances are something you're doing is probably going to be using Seeing Dead. And even if you're not going for a specific build, if you're trying to figure out something on your own, I would argue that that's probably going to be your starting point, unless you're going for something hyper specific.
Yeah, yep. Um, so it definitely happened in Borderlands 2. It's gotten way out of control in Borderlands 3, and I'm really at the point at this point, like as of this recording, we don't have any details on DLC 4 yet, other than it's probably got something to do with Krieg. That's all we know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are people going to be disappointed if there's not like ridiculously good shit in there? Like if we just come to expect it now, it's such a, there was a few weeks there around after Bounty of Blood released that I'm like, this is the best DLC that's ever come out for Borderlands, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only because the story is great and the narration and the voice acting and the environment and just all this other stuff, but just a wealth of useful guns for everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So like, is it gonna be a disappointment if we don't get just like ridiculously sick guns in DLC 4?
The problem is that we're always going to judge how good the guns are based on whatever the current meta is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
right
that's
now
true.
the current meta is the Monarch, the Light Showed, the Reflux, the Sandhawk, the Unseen Threat, the Plague Bearer, the Seventh Sense, the Flipper.
Yes.
So if the guns aren't at least that good, then I would say that most people would say that it's not going to be worth it.
Right.
And that's a
Right.
problem.
Yeah. To most casual players, which you and I kind of see ourselves as representatives of, as like top tier casual players.
Yes. Yep.
Like it's not going to be, unless the story is phenomenal or we get new skill trees or something like that. The guns have to be at least on par with previous stuff, you know?
Right. Right. So, and again, I think it goes back to that idea that they're putting too much into the guns that they have as far as what they actually do and how good they are. So, and I think a part of that, we're a big part of that comes to scaling just in general. And this is something that I've talked about a lot just because the scaling got ridiculous in Borderlands 2. But I mean, the core of it, are bigger numbers better? It's like, no, it's just a representation of a percentage of damage that you do.
Yeah.
Yep. Whether, that's the thing. If you're doing 1 point of damage against an enemy that has 100 health, or if you're doing 1 million points of damage against an enemy that has 100 million points of health, it's still the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same, it has the same effect.
Right. And
it's still all percentages.
Correct. And at the end of the day, is it satisfying to see your damage number as you progress through the game go from 1 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 and up and up and up? Yeah, it is. But once you start playing at max level, then it just stops. It stops mattering.
Yes, I agree. Unless you get that coveted like no damage number that pops up, because then you've hit 1,000,000,000.
Right. Yes. So, which feels good, but at the same time, it's still just a percentage of whatever you're doing. Even if
even if you do that, guess what? You still got to shoot Aista a lot more times before he dies.
correct. Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, I mean, at a certain point, how far do we let that go before it's just like this is just pointless at this point?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that was the thing is I remember seeing in Borderlands 2 where it stopped being numbers and they just had to put like 8.9 MIL for million.
Yeah. It got frustrating in Borderlands for me, in Borderlands 2, because I'm like, I can't even read the numbers at this point.
Yeah.
So it doesn't fucking matter, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be looking at the health bar anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just one of those things. And then kind of our last two big points. One of them is, I mean, are mayhem modifiers part of power creep, and are they too easy to re-roll to bring to necessitate this power creep?
I think they are. I think it's like re-rolling modifiers sucks. I'm not a fan of it. I usually, for each character, like kind of find my set of modifiers that I like and just kind of stick with that.
Sure.
It is mayhem modifiers themselves are a part of it because, like with you, right? Galaxy Brain and critical. What was the other one that you always use?
Yeah. Galaxy Brain, big crit energy, and then I usually like to have Laser Fair and freeze tag.
Yeah.
Because with Zane, he doesn't take much ice damage anyway.
Right. So, but between Galaxy Brain and big crit energy, like it's more bonus damage and more power creep, you know? And the fact that you can re-roll them super, super easy just makes it even better. Like if I'm running through Athenas, you know, or if I'm running through the guts of Carnivora, okay, and I'm going to go farm Agonizer, I'm probably going to re-roll my stuff to where I'm not getting Chain Gang, probably not getting whatever that one is where they get really close to you and do an elemental beam.
Yeah, no, I get it because I mean it's usually a smaller enclosed space and there's lots of enemies in it, so you're gonna have stuff where that doesn't matter.
Right, so I'm gonna re-roll that and just run through it and not worry about it, and then I'm gonna re-roll once I get to Agonizer. Yeah, and you know what it cost me? Nothing. It cost me nothing. It costs me nothing to do that, and that's.
Doesn't even really cost you time because it's literally just one button. You read what's on there, and if you don't like it, you hit the button again. It takes you a matter of literal seconds.
Yeah, I mean minutes, several minutes if you are really, really wanting to get something super specific. But
right. But most of the time, if you're wanting something specific, then you're just going to do like most people do anyway. Like Drew said, you're going to find what you like, and you're going to leave it on that character probably forever.
Right. I think it should cost Iridium to re-roll.
Considering that we have like literal tens, if not depending on who you are, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of Iridium.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Like there's nothing wrong with that, you know. At least it costs something, you know, and it gives you some kind of. And you know, something to go along with you know, things that like mayhem modifiers are relatively new, you know.
To the game as a whole, like to the franchise.
Right. And you remember back when we didn't have anointments?
Mm-hmm.
So that's weird to think about.
Yeah.
And anointments themselves are essentially power creep.
Yeah. Yeah, because now, I mean, it's pretty easy to say that Mayhem 10 is all about, you can have the right gun with the wrong anointments, and it just doesn't become useless, but it doesn't help.
Right. And with all of this being said, I do kind of think like the whole point of Borderlands is to feel super super powerful, right?
The idea is to feel powerful eventually.
Right.
Yes.
But like I have never gotten into OP levels on Borderlands 2.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
So, and it's not my preferred way to play.
Right. And but like with Borderlands 3, it really doesn't take a whole lot of effort to get to Mayhem 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you like what I do is if I get my character up to 57, I will go and farm. I can go down to um, Earl's machine, find something in there that'll work for my character, then go and farm Gigamind until I get a Hell Shock. Just a Mayhem 0, right? Level 57 Hell Shock, and immediately take that into Mayhem 6.
Yeah.
And then I can farm him continuously until I get a Mayhem 6 Hell Shock. Then I can do that until Mayhem, and then I can take that one to Mayhem 10. And then from there I can just farm him until I get some decent stuff so I can go elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
It's not hard.
Yeah, you've been doing that for like a couple months now at this point. That's been like your go-to as far as how to do it.
Yeah, it's like, just really, really easy to do.
Yeah. Like since Mayhem 2.0 has dropped, that's been like how you do things essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So, no, I get that. So, it's weird because I still feel like the game is in a better place than it ever has been. Like yes. I still feel that way, and it sounds like we're shitting all over it, and we're not trying to. It's just one of those things where we feel that there's improvements that could be made, and in a weird way, they could almost be made by retracting instead of adding to the game. As weird as that sounds.
Yeah, and like a lot of, I don't remember if we have made the argument to like, only buffs, never nerfs,
No. I know that I've said on the show before that I'm not a proponent of that.
Okay. It's just like sometimes you need to. Like it shouldn't be this easy to take on Mayhem 10. Excuse me. And we actually found out recently that I think it was with the last hotfix or the one before or something like that, that enemies were dealing way more damage than they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's even easier.
Yeah.
I do with weapon scaling from mission rewards and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of gotten to a point to where Mayhem 10 is too easy, and like I kind of miss like, hey, you want to scale that Mayhem 10 back up to 12.5,
Mm-hmm.
To like 12,500% increase on, armor, health, shields, all that shit. I'd be good with that.
Yeah. It's one of those weird things because obviously, and we say it all the time, we're not game developers, but I do applaud Gearbox for what they've done so far because we know it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard to come up with new characters with new skill trees, with new weapons and weapon types and everything like that, and new enemies and all these different things. And one of the biggest parts of it too is to make the game challenging without just having a stupid amount of health on the enemies and everything like that. Because we know that's not the answer either. It's not just, I mean, obviously we have Mayhem mode where you can have, like 10 times the amount of health and shields and everything on an enemy. But also at the same point, it's like, oh, we made it harder. It's like, oh yeah, how'd you do that? It's like, oh, we gave everyone 20 times health and shield and armor and everything. It's like, we know that's not the answer either. And so they've been working to make the game more difficult for hardcore players without having that aspect. And so really, we mean it. We think that the game is in a better place than it has been ever before since it launched, which at this point has been, almost a year. In a couple months, it'll be a year.
Yeah, 2 months in less than 2 months now. It'll be
a month. Yeah. So, and it's just one of those things where it really is in a better place than it has been ever before. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't get better.
Yeah, it's when we were discussing this episode and we were writing up the show notes and all that stuff, we decided that it's like while the game is in the best place it has been since its release, it's still not where it should be, like compared to previous games. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe it's unfair to compare it to other games,
Right.
to previous games. But if you had told me a year ago, right? Like before the game released, hey, in less than a year, like in about 6 months, you're going to be running through the max level, shit with no problems, like the equivalent of OP8 with no problems. I would have been stoked. But now that I'm here, I'm like, this isn't how it should be.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, Gearbox, I feel, as far as what they're doing, is still doing a good job with developing it. And I don't think that's in question from either one of us, at least. But I think the big thing here, and if I know that there's probably no way this is happening, but if there's anyone at Gearbox who gets this message, please don't be afraid to take chances.
Yeah.
Like, just please don't. We don't need, more damaging. We don't need higher damaging fire rate, stupid, off the wall, kind of stuff all the time. Just give me something really, really weird that I'm going to make work on one character in an amazing way.
Yeah.
So.
And if I have one message to share with them, I'm tired of using the flipper.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of tired of using the flipper as well. So today on Going, we're going to talk about the flipper.
While it is, it's easily the most powerful SMG in the game. It's kind of a necessary evil. Like it's so good that you have to have it.
Right.
So, anyways, the Flipper is a legendary Malawan SMG that is obtained more often than not from the Minosaur in Blood Sun Canyon, although generally in the Bounty of Blood DLC, if you're farming somebody else for something else, you might see a Flipper every now and then.
Yep.
The red text on it reads, "Put one foot in front of the other," which may be a reference to the song of the same name from the 1970 TV Christmas special, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. The weapon's special effect is an increase in the pellet count the longer you hold the trigger down, maxing out at 9 projectiles per shot, arranged in a 3x3 diamond pattern. Despite the large amount of projectiles, the Flipper currently uses only 1 round of ammo per shot. This is something, the reason I said currently is because Jeff and I have talked about this. I think that a good way to nerf the Flipper to bring it back to a reasonable level is to increase the ammo count per shot as well.
Yeah. So what he means is as the pellet count goes up from holding the trigger down, so would the amount of ammo that you use while holding the trigger down as well.
Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be like a 1-to-1 thing. Like I'm not going to be using 9 ammo per shot. Like that's insane. But
right.
But like once you're doing 9 projectiles per shot, maybe if it used up 3 ammo per shot, that would be reasonable.
Yeah.
I currently am at a point with my Moes that the Flipper is literally all I use. It's all I need because I can get all the ammo back and I have never once dipped below half a magazine with Moes.
Yeah, and frankly, it's surprising that you even dipped, down to like a half a magazine.
Yeah, I mean, that would be exceptionally, like, that's the exception, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's holding it down all the time. Not just while I'm trying to kill enemies, That's
right, correct.
It's like, I killed that guy, and now I'm going to turn 180 degrees to kill something behind me, and I still hold down the trigger.
Right. So obviously the flipper is very good because it means that you're essentially having, once you continue to hold the trigger down and once it's towards the end of that process of giving you more pellets, you're essentially firing a very small spread shotgun that has the fire rate and the ammo capacity of an SMG.
Yes.
So
and
it makes it
and it's elemental.
correct. Yeah, and it's elemental. And it's Molly one, which means that it's got 2 elements. And obviously you can get anointment, which means that you can have technically 3 elements if you do it right, which that is how I prefer to use mine on Zane specifically. Is what I do is I go for action skill active anointment that gives me an additional 200% damage that's cryo to feed into Zane's already natural cryo abilities and everything like that. And then I have it with fire and shock because I find that those are going to be primarily the 2 types of damage that I'm going to go up against. I either need to strip shields or I need to just do fleshy damage. It's very rare that I actually switch to corrosive for something that has armor unless it's a really big health bar.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find one that's either shock with action skill and corrosive or corrosive with action skill and shock.
Right.
Because then I could just take on the entire Guardian takedown with one gun.
Right. Which is bananas.
That's bananas. That's not right. It shouldn't happen.
So, but yeah, that is the flipper. Again, here's the thing. It's so weird because I feel like I'm giving myself whiplash from the juxtapositions that we make about this kind of stuff. It's like the flipper. It's a fantastic gun. I want to use it. It's like
yeah.
So, but that's kind of the idea, is that we're hoping that the power creep levels off, and who knows, maybe at the point where all of the content is out and everything, and then they're like, all right, every gun that's ever going to be in the game is in the game, and every piece of gear that's going to be in the game is in the game. Now we can really truly balance because we're not going to be adding new stuff in.
Yeah, that's true.
But who knows?
Not I.
Said that guy.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us on this episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Good luck and good drops.
Bye.